This single biggest thing in trying to address climate change, if you're in forestry, is keeping the forest. If you keep the forest growing and healthy, it sequesters carbon. And we all know that if a community can make a living from their forest, they're going to try and keep it. If they can't earn a living from the forest, then they're going to put it to alternative use, like chopping it down and growing crops. So the single biggest thing we can do is make certain that communities around the world who live in and near forests can prosper by keeping the forest healthy and growing. If you go down the main street of a small town in rural Canada, you'll see many people whose families have lived there for generations. And for many years, they were able to think of this as their home and be able to control their lives more or less from within their community. But this is no longer true. Everyone who lives in a small town, in a rural community, anywhere in the world, lives at the intersection of their community and the global environment. How does the global environment affect a small town somewhere in the far north of Canada? Well, very simply, the climate is changing and changing their ecosystem. Canadian forests feel the impact of a changed climate dramatically through outbreaks of pestilence, new insects, changing growing patterns. And as this happens, the capacity of these communities to live the way they have in the past begins to disappear. The forest they've enjoyed for recreation and spiritual support is starting to change. And very directly, their capacity to harvest trees and make a living by selling products, both wood, paper, and pulp, in global markets is changing because a changed climate is reducing the capacity of those forests to be productive. So people who live at this intersection begin to realize that addressing climate change is the single biggest imperative for the future generations that hope to enjoy lives in forest communities. In Canada, what we have done is try to take a cradle-to-grave approach, ensuring that for every tree that is taken, another is planted. And the net deforestation rate in Canada from forestry is now 0. But just replacing the trees is not enough. We process the trees in factories using energy, and replacing fossil fuels with green waste-based biofuels is absolutely essential. So far in Canada, we've gone to a 60% utilization rate of waste-based biofuels. But our objective, and we intend to meet it, is to be 100% green energy in our mills. We could easily say that's enough. If we replace all the trees and use green energy for processing, we've done our job. But it wouldn't be true, because when the product leaves the factory and goes to the consumer, it still has a life, and that life affects the climate. The good news is, for as long as it's in use, the carbon in the paper, the carbon in the wood is sequestered and kept out of the atmosphere. But at the end of life, it can follow 2 roads. It could be used for fuel or recycled, and that keeps it within nature's balance. Or it can go to landfill, where it will turn to methane, which has 30 times the impact on the climate than carbon dioxide, and become an environmental menace. So our responsibility is from cradle to grave, to ensure that trees are replanted, to make our mills entirely dependent on bioenergy, and to work with our customers, consumers, and municipalities to ensure that at the end of the life cycle, the product is responsibly put back into nature's carbon cycle.